You ever had something that you're really not looking forward to, like you are dreading it, digging your heels in, but the thing just comes ever closer and you're like, make it stop? Maybe it's a presentation at work or school, maybe it's having the in-laws over, or maybe you just deal with a shit ton of anxiety. If that sounds like you, welcome to the video. I deal with a lot of anxiety. Social anxiety, general anxiety, anxiety about having anxiety. It's a fun time. So it's inevitable that I dread stuff coming up. I obsessively worry about future events. But then I heard this quote and it helped to reframe unnecessary anxiety. So let me tell you about that and let me tell you why it works and even the neuroscience behind it. Guys, we are getting nerdy today. I love it. So if I have impending dread over a situation, I say to myself, this is going to be fun. And immediately my brain is like, no it's not. What kind of magic mushrooms are you on, girl? Like, let me drown in this dread, okay? Thank you. I feel like my brain can be quite stubborn and dramatic sometimes. This is going to be fun. It's like the complete opposite. But it's a reminder that sometimes life doesn't need to be taken so seriously. We can have fun with it. Of course, there are situations which you do need a certain degree of seriousness for, but sometimes it's not that serious. We're all gonna die. That's cheerful. I learned about this tip from Ali Abdal. In one of his videos, he mentions that he says this phrase in relation to productivity. If he's struggling to do a task, then he reframes it to say, actually, this is gonna be fun, and it helps him to do the task. So I took that phrase and applied it to things that I was anxious about. Now, it doesn't work every time, for reasons I'll explain later. I love that I am already contradicting myself. It's called balance. Look it up. So the first time I used this was actually when family were coming round for a Sunday lunch. I don't know if any of my family watch these videos, but anyway. I've always had anxiety about being around extended family because I always feel like I'm an outsider, like I don't fit in. Even around my own family, to the point where I feel like I need to force a version of myself to try and fit in with everyone else. Healthy. So on like a Friday or something, my mum says to me, family are coming round for Sunday lunch. And immediately I felt that anxiety dragging me down like an undercurrent, like someone get me a goddamn snorkel, okay? Then I remember this quote and I decided to try it to see if it actually did work, because what have I got to lose? Literally nothing. Leading up to the day, and especially on the day, I kept repeating to myself, this is going to be fun. To be honest, the first few times it did not work because my brain was like, lol, that's a funny one, get back to your seat. Like I said, stubborn and dramatic. But when I started to ask why, and I actually put a reason behind it, it started to break down the anxiety like a small chisel in a rock, chipping away at the ball of anxiety. I don't know what this is. This feels like I'm drumming. I might have been drumming, but I don't think I was. I think I was just chiseling. We'll go with chiseling. Why am I still doing it? Stop doing it, Kate. So often we can immediately direct our focus onto the negative things. It's called negativity bias, and it's an ancient hardwired mechanism built into us to protect us back in the day. The good old days, you know? I don't know. I wasn't there. So I found that when I put a reason behind the phrase, it accentuated it and helped my brain to go, oh yeah, you might be kind of right with this, you know. It started to open up my mind to different outcomes. For example, I would say, this is going to be fun because I get to see my family, I get to talk to my cousins, I get the opportunity to connect with them. What the hell? And it actually freaking worked. It didn't stop the anxiety completely, but the majority of it had been swept away, and the result being I actually became more confident in the situation. I would actually be talking about my life because I find that so often when someone says, so what have you been up to lately? I'm just like, I forget everything that's ever happened to me. Why is my brain like this? Who knows? We don't know. No one knows. I don't even know. And I am my brain. Am I? No, my brain is separate. No, it's not. I think it's me. Maybe it is separate. Ooh, that's a deeper topic for another time. There were a few golden moments where I was speaking to someone and then it suddenly hit me like, wow, I'm so grateful to know you. Like, I'm so grateful you're in my life. And that gratitude fed back into the original sentence of, this is going to be fun. We love a feedback loop. So when I gave myself a reason to be excited and say this is going to be fun because I felt myself embracing the words and actually taking on their meaning. When you approach something with a sense of playfulness, it almost dissolves the anchor of that anxiety. It starts to break it down and you realize that actually You can have fun with this. On a physiological level, your body doesn't know the difference between nervousness and excitement. It's the same chemicals are being released. The only thing that's different is how your brain is interpreting it. Another example of this was when I was asked to be a part of an application for something, and I needed to do a Zoom interview with 8 people, 8 other human beings. When I was first asked, the anxiety came crashing in like, okay, everybody sit down, it's my time to shine. And sure enough, the thoughts running through my head was, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, what if I mess up the words? What if I don't know the answer? What if I ruin this application? Like, this is for someone else. And then I was like, wait, stop. This is going to be fun, because I get the opportunity to speak about my experience with this thing. I get the opportunity to help someone else out. Like, they have asked me. Why? I still don't know. So again, putting that gratitude behind the statement, and you approach the whole situation entirely differently. So you have layers with this, okay? You know we love a metaphor on this channel. The first layer, you have the initial quote of, this is going to be fun. And that's like the strike of the match. And then you have the reason behind why it's going to be fun. That's the flame on the match. And then when you layer gratitude on top of that, you've got yourself a full-blown candle, baby. Sometimes we forget that there's an opportunity to have fun. Life is about having fun. And this quote is a reminder of that. So these are just a few examples where it's helped. There are more, of course, but I think you get the idea. Starting up my own business. This is going to be fun. Creating YouTube videos, this is going to be fun. This event coming up with loads of people and anxiety is everywhere, this is going to be fun. I think that's really important to say it with a genuine smile, because I think that changes the way you say stuff. So the next time you feel stressed or anxious about a situation coming up, approach it with a sense of playfulness and watch what happens. Remember the layers. Strike the match, light the fire, baby. Now, let's talk about the science. When we think of play, we associate it with children, right? But actually, according to the scientists, play is an incredibly important part of adult life too. It's not just about games and sports, which we'll get into in a bit. So no matter what age you are, it is important to play. All of this following information is sourced from the one and only Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is a neuroscientist and ophthalmologist at Stanford School, and he does an incredible podcast called the Huberman Lab podcast. I will link it below. I highly recommend if you're interested in using scientific tools to improve everyday life. This feels like an ad. It's not an ad. I just genuinely love him and everything that he talks about. All of this following information is sourced from his episode called The Power of Play. What a great title, right? Yeah, I'm already invested. Sign me up. First thing to note about play is that play is actually homeostatically regulated, which is just a fancy biological term for keeping the body in balance. So for example, sleep is homeostatically regulated. If we have too much sleep, we tend to need less of it. If we have too little, we tend to need more to kind of balance it out. Of course, there are exceptions with that, but that's kind of like a general rule. And play is exactly the same thing. If we are restricted from playing for a long period of time, we tend to want to play more when we do get the opportunity. And this is particularly true in children. But whether we play as a child or an adult, we release small amounts of endogenous opioids in the brain. And endogenous just means, again, biologically made. So I'm not talking about the opioids that you get addicted to, like heroin. But when we do play, we release those opioids and it kind of dopes us up a little bit, and it actually allows our prefrontal cortex to get smarter. Now stick with me here. I'm gonna try and make this easy to understand. The prefrontal cortex is known for things like problem solving and decision making, predicting outcomes in the future. So like, if I do this, then that will be the outcome. If I go this way to work, then I'll get there quicker, that kind of thing. It's anticipating events in the environment. But when we play and we release those endogenous opioids, it allows the prefrontal cortex to open up, to explore different contingencies, to explore different possibilities. And it starts to interact differently with the environment, with other people, and more importantly, the roles we play in our own lives. It's like our brain is clever. So when we play, we can explore different possibilities, but only if it's in a low stakes environment. And by low stakes, I mean something that's not intentionally serious or risky. So for example, like gambling, that would be a high stakes environment because you're gambling your money away and you might lose all of it, and that's not good for anyone. Anyone? better. For example, low stakes would be playing a board game, right? And if you lose that, nothing major is gonna happen, okay? Contrary to what most people think about Monopoly, the world will not end if you lose. I think we've all had some kind of trauma from Monopoly before. So really, the benefit of play is to explore different possibilities in a low stakes environment. That is really important, because when we do this, we start to learn more about ourselves and others. We start to learn if we are very focused on the rules or if we are very competitive or not. And we learn about others. We learn if they are very competitive. We learn if they are a cheater. We all know someone. I know you just thought of them. And what's really important to make clear here is that anyone at any age can benefit from engaging in this play mindset. And what this means is broadening the outcomes of what could happen, especially if you're engaging in something that's completely new to you, like you've never done it before. Because if you're already good at something, then you won't get the benefits in terms of changing your brain for the better by using play. I feel like I just said a lot of words. Did that make any sense at all? Basically, doing something new is really important too. Wow, the sun has just suddenly come out. Okay, apologies if it just gets really bright all of a sudden, like now. Sun is a paid actor. But you might be sitting there thinking, Kate, that's all great and whatnot, but what is the purpose of play? Like, why do we need to play as human beings? Well, I'm glad you asked. When we were babies and we were in discomfort or we needed something, we tend to make a lot of noise to get the attention of the caregiver, who would then give a guess on what we need and then go and get it. The baby brain doesn't know what it needs, it just knows this state of discomfort, and the solution always comes from the outside. And this rule is actually taken through life as adults as well. Like, if we are in discomfort, we look outside of our bodies for a solution. If we're hungry or thirsty, we look outside of ourselves to get what we need. When we become toddlers, we tend to think that everything is ours, right? And there was this famous poem done by this child psychologist called The Toddler's Creed, which actually reflects how a healthy toddler thinks. And the basic gist of it is that everything is theirs, which if you've ever played with a toddler, it is spot on. It kind of goes like this, right? If I want it, it's mine. If I give it to you and change my mind later, it's mine. If we're playing, then all the pieces are mine, etc., etc. It basically reveals to us how narrow-minded and self-centered toddlers are. But believe it or not, that's the view of a healthy toddler. So as a baby, everything is delivered to us. So when we grow into toddlers, we believe that everything is ours. And I tell you all of this because this is the important purpose of play. Because when toddlers start to play with other kids in a low-stakes environment, they start to learn that everything is not about them. Everything is not theirs. They learn how to share through the process of play. And that really opens up their minds to different alternatives, to different possibilities. That is the evolutionary purpose of play. So like I said, your prefrontal cortex is usually known as the decision maker or the problem solver. It becomes more open to the possibilities of different outcomes. And this might mean doing something that you're not proficient in. Because if we do something that we're already good at, then we already know the outcome. We already know the alternatives, and therefore your brain doesn't change as much. But if we do something that we don't normally do, it's incredibly beneficial because there is new information to be learned about ourselves and others. So for example, puppies. Puppies have those sharp little dagger-like teeth, and when they play with other pups in the litter, usually one of them will yelp to say, hey, well, that was too hard, don't do that again. And that's how puppies learn soft bite, because they got feedback from other littermates during the process of play. So play is not just about the games, it's about experimenting, it's testing, it's seeking different outcomes, different possibilities. And we can absolutely bring those elements into situations where we have unnecessary anxiety. Experimenting in those situations, exploring different outcomes can be extremely beneficial. Your prefrontal cortex actually changes in response to those experiences. It's called neuroplasticity, and play is the foundational portal to neuroplasticity. So it's important to play in a low stakes environment because not only do we learn about ourselves and other people, but also because there are low amounts of adrenaline in the body. When the stakes are high, adrenaline, epinephrine, all of these neurochemicals actually stifle the ability to play. They stifle those endogenous opioids from being released. So sports is actually quite a high stakes thing, but especially professional sports and Olympic athletes, because so much depends on that, right? You got reputation, you got sponsorships, salaries, injuries, that sort of thing. But even if you're playing a game of football yourself and you're taking it way too seriously, then it's not possible to experiment with contingency testing. But if you enter into the game with a playful mindset, then it gives you the opportunity to be curious, explore different avenues. Like, what happens if I do this instead of that? What happens if I throw the ball over here? I don't know football. Did I say throw the ball? You don't throw a ball, do you, in football? No, that's why it's called football. It makes sense, it does make sense. And it actually results in performing way better, like especially if it's a new or novel experience. So I have a little story about this. There was this one time I was playing darts around the clock, I think, in a group of people, and I knew that my aim was as good as a drunk flamingo. I imagine drunk flamingos aren't good with their aim. So I didn't take it seriously. I kind of went into it with like, oh well, who cares if I miss, it's just a bit of fun. And to my surprise, and everyone else's, I got the results needed. Like I actually managed to hit the dartboard on the right target. And then everyone was like, whoa, Kate's really good at this. And my confidence and my ego swelled. And so the next time it came around, I was suddenly way more serious and competitive. And guess what happened? I completely missed. The drunk flamingo came back. And people say, oh, it's just beginner's luck. But what if the adrenaline and the seriousness actually stifled those opioids from being released? Therefore, I performed worse. So when the stakes are low, we have this opportunity to engage in a play mindset. What happens if I do this? What happens if I try that instead? Experimenting, we love to see it. You're almost being curious to tinker with something. So for example, instead of following the recipe exactly to the measurements, down to the book, instead being like, what if I try this instead? What if I put this in there? Also the same with musicians, like what happens if I go to this chord or go to that note instead of following the music sheet rigidly? And those people who are stickler for the rules and everything must go in a certain way tend to have more of a rigid brain than those who have a more fluid mindset and those who tinker and experiment and who are open to new possibilities. I did not know this until now. We are learning. And that kind of mindset is extremely beneficial, not just to ourselves, but to our relationships and our outlook on situations. You literally change your brain for the better by adopting this mindset. It's crazy. We love it. Yes. On the other hand, our nervous system rewires almost immediately in response to a traumatic experience. And research shows that children who experience trauma actually have a harder time playing and therefore having a harder time being able to change their brain later on in life. Which kind of makes sense, right? Because if there's high levels of stress and adrenaline, it blocks the play circuitry. Like the science there, it all makes sense. However, that is not concrete because research shows that adults who do engage in play can reopen those circuits. There's actually a really interesting way of treating severe trauma now, and that is through the process of play, in which the main focus is to rewire the traumatized brain. Playing can help people who have experienced trauma. Even things like engaging your body in dancing when you don't normally dance. Moving your body in a different way which you'd normally feel comfortable in really allows your brain to access new ways of thinking and change as a result of it. Okay. Interestingly, dancing and dynamic movement can lead to neuroplasticity in the brain because it replicates almost the same brain circuitry as play. So if you do anything today, dance. I don't know if you'd call that dancing. I don't think I would. So just as a reminder, if you're already proficient at something, then you will derive less benefits in terms of changing your brain as a result of play. So the key really is to do something new, something that you're not really good at, with low levels of adrenaline and stress, to explore what happens, to tinker with it, to be curious, to experiment. This is going to be fun. By implementing this style of play, we can change who we are for the better. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Class dismissed. So knowing what we know now, and we know a lot now, we can reframe situations where we have unnecessary anxiety to say, this is going to be fun, and approach it with a sense of curiosity and that play mindset of exploring different possibilities, different outcomes. And that will not only transform the situation you're in, but it will also transform how you respond in those situations too. Okay. Now, of course, if you're in a high stakes environment, you'll be less likely to want to approach it this way for good reason. Like if it's something that you gotta take seriously, then by all means throw this quote out the window. If you are a surgeon going into the operating theater, like, this is gonna be fun, let's experiment and tinker. Don't do that. Don't do that. That would be really bad. But if it's a low stakes environment and you can reduce those levels of adrenaline before you go in, it can help open up the play circuitry and help you to actually enjoy the situation and not take it too seriously. So for example, I had never taken myself on a solo date before, but this year for Valentine's Day, I decided to do just that, you know, be your own date, that kind of thing, self-love, we love it. And I was nervous. Social anxiety would be like, everyone's gonna stare at you. What are you doing, you mad woman? But I was like, you know what? This is a relatively low stakes environment. This is going to be fun. And what's more, I had a free drink to use at Costa. So I took it and I took my laptop. I forgot my hard drive, which had all of my work on. And I went into it with a playful mindset, curious to see what it was like. And I freaking loved it. Afterwards, I was properly buzzing. It's probably my prefrontal cortex being like, whoa, the contingencies, man. I don't know why my prefrontal cortex is an American teenager in the 90s, but that's an insight into Kate's brain. I can also tell you when this technique didn't work. And knowing the neurobiology now, it makes sense as to why it didn't. So for Christmas last year, I made up a game for my family to play. There were about 9 people there, and yes, it's a relatively low stakes environment, right? But adrenaline was kicking my butt because I had to stand up in front of these people and explain the rules of a game that I had made up. Terrifying. Leading up to that situation, I was saying, this is going to be fun, this is going to be fun. My brain was listening to the adrenaline, not to the words that I was speaking. And now I understand why it didn't work. Taking it less seriously, reducing those levels of adrenaline properly would have allowed those endogenous opioids to release, I assume. That's just an educated guess, but I think it would have. And it was a fun game in the end.
1, 2, 3. Quack, 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 I'm a sheep.
So what we can learn is if the situation is relatively high stakes and your job is on the line or you're taking things way too seriously, then the neurobiology for play won't kick in and you won't derive these benefits. But if we can enter into these anxious situations by reframing it to be fun, taking it less seriously, wanting to experiment, being curious, to tinker, then it will dramatically transform how you respond in those situations. Don't forget the layers. This is going to be fun because gratitude. Light a match, strike it, baby, work it, I don't know. And I don't stand for toxic positivity, okay? Like good vibes only, because how is ignoring the problem going to help? Spoiler alert. It doesn't. And this is why I put up quotes on my Etsy shop that will actually help you. Like, this is going to be fun. It helped me so much that this was actually one of the first quotes that I put up on my Etsy shop. As styled by moi. If you like this t-shirt, check out the link in my description if you're interested. You don't have to. It's your life. Do what you want. It's gone very dark again. I don't know what is happening with this weather. Are we in an apocalypse right now? It does look apocalyptic out there. But anyway, whatever the situation is that you are dreading, that you are anxious about, let go of taking it too seriously and enter it with a playful mindset by saying, this is going to be fun. And I'll see you in the next one.